I was 8 months pregnant and we went to one of the big festivals and markets that happens in the US called the Jackson Wild Film Festival. Fudged my papers because when you're 8 months and you literally bled through your pregnancy, no one's going to give you, sanction you to travel, right? Fudged my papers and I traveled. I was like, bacha ho jayega fir se, you know, but kaam paisa bhi chahiye. That was literally the condition we were in.
Oh my God.
But Piper happened at that time. And we made the film, and just after that there was someone I know who came forward and said that, you know, we want to build a wildlife division, and why don't you and your husband head that division. It was a Bombay based production house, so we did that work. Watch a lot of films and spend a lot of time in the wild. Do a naturalist course. Understand the bees, birds and trees and, you know, species that exist. All right, because you'll need that knowledge. You'll use that knowledge in your film for a technical skill, which I think every filmmaker should have, whether you use it or not. You should know. Take care of your microhabitat, and it'll build on that. It really will. The larger habitats, the connection that we have within the ecosystems will all come together.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayathi.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
I don't know, did you watch the Oscars recently?
I mean, we were joking about this because I never watched the Oscars, but I feel like I watched them because, on Instagram. It was just all over Instagram.
Yeah, I watched it. It was fantastic because I watched it because India won so many awards.
So many, you mean two?
Two, yeah, that's huge. That was huge. When was the last time India won 2 awards at the Oscars?
Yeah.
So I got very excited and I watched the Oscars. And today we are actually talking to a very important filmmaker, actually a national awarded filmmaker on scientific films. How cool is that?
It is really cool, and I'm actually a little intimidated because we know nothing about these subjects. Like usually our guests, at least one of us knows a little bit, right? Like at least, I mean, we've had archaeologists and you've been fine with that. We've had eating insects, and I guess, you know, it's fine to know nothing about eating insects. But in this case, I guess we'll be talking about wildlife filmmaking, we'll be talking about human interest stories, filmmaking in general. And we'd like to welcome on board Akanksha Sood, who has very kindly joined us on an incredibly rainy Sunday.
On a strange Sunday.
On
it's a strange weather Sunday. Yeah.
In fact, people are on Instagram right now posting, in Gurgaon at least, it's like a hailstorm, I think, right now.
It's very romantic, the whole idea of this rain, but this is unseasonal rain and it really spells a lot of gloom and doom. It's not good for us because North India, wheat is getting harvested.
Yes.
And for a poor farmer who just piles up the harvest on one side, if it gets wet, it affects the quality of wheat that will now eventually come into the market. And obviously the airborne diseases are going to go up because wind patterns have changed. So
yeah,
there's a whole lot of.
And we're seeing this, I think, more and more. And I think one of the reasons why we were quite excited to interview you is because it is a conversation that I think we all kind of like run away from. At least I do, because it was, for instance, ecological damage is such a depressing conversation. You know, it's like literally just very gloom and doom. And I think I have a very romanticized version of it from my childhood, because we used to take these trips with my dad to Jim Corbett and like stay in like these guest houses and see tigers and not really know the larger story to it. And then the more you sort of like see how much there's been like habitat loss and you know, the amount, like the irreversible damage and climate change, it's really, really depressing. So I just wanted to get an idea, like, how do you not get depressed on a day-to-day basis, like working with these kind of subjects? Is it, I mean, are you made of like thicker skin than the rest of us? What's happening?
No, I don't think so. It's got to do with that. It's just got to do with how you train yourself when you're working in the wild, inside out, you know, day in and day out. But you're very right in saying it can get very depressing. I think the messaging of films on the natural world, on environment, on animals, there are right now 2 extremes to it. You know, it's either gloom and doom or it's really pretty pictures. People realize there's gloom and doom, so pretty pictures are not being accepted. But then everything coming out is about gloom and doom, and people are shutting down to it. There's just so much. The way you're brushing your teeth is incorrect because you're letting water flow. The way you take a bath, you're washing your car, you garden.
There's way too much guilt these days.
There's too much
in
of
everything.
guilt.
I feel like even I'm doing.
And for something that our generation is doing, our children are being taught in school about this, like from nursery onwards, and they're growing up feeling just so guilty about everything. They will shut down faster with this kind of messaging. So it really has to change, and that is why a film like Elephant Whisperers or a film like All That Breathes are such a welcome change. They're talking about all this, they're showing you all this, but the style, the narrative, the storytelling is so different. You know, you don't know whether you're watching a feature film or you're watching a documentary, but actually you're watching a documentary. So that is where it kind of, you know, makes a lot of difference, your storytelling. And that is something I think when it comes to the natural world is what filmmakers now and from here on need to focus on. Say what you want to say, but how are you going to say that without the audience getting overwhelmed, intimidated?
And how did you sort of choose your themes? Because there is wildlife, there's, like Getty said earlier, there are human stories. You've been awarded for them. The film industry in our country is a big industry, right? But the field that you work in is a rather tedious one. It's difficult. It's probably completely open to anyone, unregulated, and there's no system. So how do you choose your themes and stick with them to the end? I bet that's a journey.
And convince someone to fund them. I mean, like as a filmmaker, especially as a documentary filmmaker, do you struggle with that a little bit?
Always.
Yeah.
Money, creativity.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to filmmaking, especially documentary, non-fiction, those are the biggest limiting factors. I think even in fiction, you know, those would be the limiting factors. But, you know, I've been doing wildlife films for 21, 22 years now. I started off literally, like my hardcore career started off at 21, just doing this. And early on, content, the way we see it, what we've been viewing itself has undergone a lot of change. It's kept up with the times, the demand, the need, how, you know, in wildlife, things have changed. So from where you were discovering species and talking about behavior, it was all about how an elephant, you know, walks, sleeps, talks, has sex, has babies, and goes from one place to the other. You wanted to know more. It was all about behavior. From there on, the focus shifted to drama because there was a rise in conflict with humans, you know, human and elephant confrontations going on. So the narrative shifted to that. Then it moved on to a little bit more scientific films, but then it came to conservation. Oh, this is going away, and this is on the verge of extinction. This is on the brink. So the narrative shifted towards conservation, all right? But now it's again shifting, and with films like The Elephant Whisperers, All That Breathes, the narrative is again going to shift, right? But so it's about what is happening with the times, that wildlife filmmaking has also changed. Budgets have gone up and down, obviously dictated by the recession in a way. Because where are you seeing these films? You're seeing them on television, and how does television run? It's advertising revenue. So if there's a recession, ad spend goes low, as a result of which budgets decrease. So what you can make over a period of 3 years, 4 years now, you probably have to do it within a year, or you don't even have that kind of money. Co-productions have started, which was never something we saw earlier on. You know, you're making a film exclusively for the BBC or for the National Geographic. To today, you have BBC, National Geographic, NHK Japan, Arte all coming together because they want to make a story, and it requires that kind of funding, and so you sell territories. Just how fiction works.
Yeah.
You know, Shahrukh Khan film sold in X market for some amount and B market for some amount. It's a lot of like this. But eventually, where are you seeing this film? It's all on television. So it's very, the economics of it is very similar to what happens globally, right? I've forgotten the question.
No. Girl, that was great. No, but I agree with everything you're saying.
The question was about funding, so I think you were very, very well on track in explaining that. It's just to bring you guys back down to
But I have
reality.
a follow-up question to this.
No, let me just finish this bit on funding. Okay, so, okay, we make films, right? Bollywood does it. Documentary filmmakers do it. Um, what is documentary? It's not structured. It's not scripted. You're working in an environment which is completely not in your control. In the middle of all of this, we come wildlife filmmakers who are specialist factuals. I like to use that term because it gives us a lot of seriousness. But yeah, we're another non-fiction category in a way. But we're very, very focused and specialized in what we do. It's filmmaking, but it's also understanding an environment, the natural world, where it's not a studio setup. It's not like I can say, Tiger, 4 o'clock, this water hole. Be there.
Everything is out of your control.
It's out of your control.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and suddenly it starts raining, you know. It's happened so much on shoots. Very recently also there was a flash flood. We were in Dras and we had to just get out of there.
Dras is up above Kargil, right?
Yes.
Dras is where the
Kargil wall started there.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
so what
There's
were
a lot
you
of-
shooting?
I'm filming brown bears over
Brown
there.
bears. Ooh.
Bears which are brown bears. So
I'll try and remember that.
My daughter reads a book
they're
called Brown
black
Bears.
bears, brown bears,
Yeah. You
sloth
sound
bears,
like an episode of The Office. Black bear, brown bear,
sloth
beak.
bear, Malayan sun bear. So yeah, but again, what is the question? Funding.
Yeah.
So, now Bollywood is structured in many ways. They have a way films work. Obviously, if it's hardcore commercial cinema, there's a whole system in place about distribution, funding, all of that. Parallel cinema also has its own market. Right now, when it comes to a documentary, it's difficult to convince a producer saying, okay, give me 1 crore minimum.
Yeah.
Give me 1 crore, give it to me for 3 years. Sorry, I can't give you any interest. All right? And I'll make a film on animals. They don't understand this. आप शाहरुख खान का वॉइस ओवर करा सकते हैं उसमें.
Have you actually gotten that as a serious question? Yeah.
उनको लगा सकते हैं, voice over, चलो voice over ही करा देंगे उनसे.
Yeah.
I was like, if you know him, why don't you bring him on? I'd be happy.
मैं अभी बोलती चैट जीपीटी को बोलती हूँ वो भी होगा शाहरुख खान का.
But it's very difficult. Bollywood films don't take so many years to make. Wildlife films can take anything from, depending on your story and what you're really doing, anything from a couple of months to years. Years.
True.
Who's going to give you that money? And then in a country like India, where there's either general entertainment or there's fiction, they're films. No, who's showing documentary? Again, there's a National Geographic and there's a Discovery and there's a Sony BBC Earth. Sony BBC Earth is still, I think, true to what they are doing, but a Discovery and a National Geographic in India what are they doing? Are they producing wildlife content? Very little.
Yeah.
Religion, military,
Yeah.
food is what's really selling.
Yeah.
And that for me is general entertainment only.
Yeah, wildlife is shrinking as a category.
It's not shrinking, I'd say. I would say interest is growing now in films like this. But I think the decision to produce these films in a market like
it's
India,
at the negotiating table where it loses.
they
It doesn't
do
get
not
to
have,
the David Attenborough
they
stage.
do not have the commissioning authority for these films because they're obviously very big budget films. You can't make films in 10-20 lakhs. It doesn't work like that. 10-20 lakhs is probably just the filming fees I have to pay the forest department. In India, if I have to film for over a couple of years or even a year or so, depending on where I'm filming, it's 40,000 rupees per day per camera in Madhya Pradesh versus probably nothing in 1 or 2 places in the northeast. So there's again no standardization. All right. I started off my career, obviously I did all kinds of roles, but when it came to like the first film, we made it on tigers. Because that is the only thing that sells out of India back then, in the 2000s. Tiger films sold. For everything else, there's competition sitting in Africa. They just don't have the tiger and we have it.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to really make a career, you start with a tiger film. And you obviously, every tiger film, I think that kind of comes out, if you look at it in a way, the story is the same. The characters are different. Someone's shooting in Tadopa, someone's shooting in Ranthambore. Most of the films are being shot in Ranthambore on tigers. But that's like the mud island of
Tiger
So I
storytelling.
heard.
natural for naturalistic filmmaking in India, the mud island. But yeah, you know, that was the reality. But now, in the last 20 years, the focus has shifted so much. Diversity is one of the things. Lesser known species, habitats is what I'm currently working on. You know, that's that's selling. There's so many filmmakers, great filmmakers, youngsters who are coming up and who are not starting their career with tiger films.
That's a
As
pretty
long as
pivotal
they have
change.
great stories and they can, you know, you have a great story, you can even sell a frog as a tiger and, you know, have a channel commission that work.
Hey man, there's like really cool frogs in our country as well.
No, and I
Praveen.
saw you recently won an episode of yours won something, and it was an episode on bats.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
the national award
Yeah.
we got for. It's a series that I do in partnership with HCL and their conservation arm called the Habitats Trust.
Okay.
It's a series called On the Brink. So it is about shifting the narrative away from our megafauna and putting the spotlight on lesser known species, on lesser known habitats, the habitats these species live in, and also the spotlight on the scientists who are working in these environments.
Yeah.
You know, the researchers, biologists. In a way, it's their story, and through them, the work they do, that you get to understand the animal and the landscape and all that is for and against the species.
Yeah, so I think that's been a pretty pivotal shift, right? I mean, like from just tigers and rhinos and elephants to being able to tell stories about bats and frogs and bees, which are also
Yes.
incredibly important parts of the ecosystem. A question that I'd like to ask you, and this is something that comes up on all of our podcasts, like if you check out our YouTube, there's somebody or the other who's asked, how does somebody get into this career? And I think you were saying that you're not formally trained in filmmaking, which I find fascinating because, you know, you think that somebody who's like achieved what you have achieved as a wildlife filmmaker would have had formal training in wildlife filmmaking. But let's just say that if I was 18 and I was asking you this question, you know, how do I enter this field?
Even at 40, you can. All right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. At any point. Yeah.
But so wildlife filmmaking is filmmaking in a way, right? The basic craft remains the same. It depends on what you want to do. Do you want to be a writer, a cinematographer, a sound recordist, a graphic artist, a director? What do you want to do? You may not be able to figure out all of this initially because it's a field you just don't know. You don't know anything about
Yeah.
filmmaking. There are lots of ways to go about it. Go to film school. I am anti-film school because I'm not from film school, and today where I stand, I've learned everything on the job. It's just that I don't have a great theoretical grounding because I'm not from film school. So if you get into technicalities of the camera and all of that, no. But I can still explain to my cinematographer what I want.
Yeah.
It's his job to get me that. How we do it within the parameters that we work in, he has to. I can explain it. I can tell him in layman language, मुझे ये चाहिए, वो देगा. But film school is great, I think, or any kind of professional training is great when you want a technical skill set, when you want to be a sound recordist, a cinematographer. All right? Storytelling, yeah, there are script courses, direction, there's a course, but I think you don't have to go through all of that. But for a technical skill, which I think every filmmaker should have, whether you use it or not, you should know. And that's what I feel, you know, I don't really have a technical skill. I mean, now obviously I can operate a camera and I can do photography, sound though. I don't even want to touch it, but yeah, I know how it works. Basics I know. I don't have practical training in it and I stay away from it. So film school is great. For technical knowledge, if you can't go to film school, do a course from a private institution, why not? But if you want to do wildlife, over and above all of this, watch a lot of films and spend a lot of time in the wild. Do a naturalist course. Understand the bees, birds and trees and, you know, species that exist. All right? Because you'll need that knowledge. You'll use that knowledge in your films. All right? Train yourself to become very, very patient because there could be hours that run into days where you're just sitting and waiting. That's very important. If you don't want to go to film school, you don't want to do any kind of professional training, but I would say doing something in the wildlife space as a naturalist or working with an NGO, something of that sort always helps. Go find someone, a production house or a person who'll take you as an intern. Learn the ropes working in a production house. Find a mentor, not happen early on, but find someone who will say, okay, doesn't matter who you are, come, work with us for 3 months, we're doing this project. Just see how it works.
Yeah.
And figure it out. Because you'll know the different departments that exist. You probably get to, as an intern, move easily between those departments, all right? You'll figure out what interests you, what doesn't interest you, and what interests you is something that you can build on as you go. So there are lots of ways, and obviously there's another way which now really works is get onto YouTube. Study cinematography, sound, all of this. Get those basics. Experiment, beg, borrow, steal equipment, and make a film and see how it works. Watch films, that's very important, and watch all kinds of films. Don't stick to watching wildlife films. My storytelling style over the years has changed so much itself. I started off my career, like I said, doing tiger films, but they were hardcore blue chip natural history films, which are really the top end big budget films. There are no people involved.
Yeah.
It's following a particular animal for months or years and telling their story. And this mother with cubs and how she brings her cubs up and then the drama that happens, all of those things. That was blue chip, right? Behavior, a lot of behavior focus. Went on to doing then other kinds of films, and now then I did typical documentaries, which included 2 human interest films that I have made, Mrityu Bhoj and The Pad Piper. Very typical documentary, nothing groundbreaking. But now, the series also that I'm doing now on the Brink, the first one, because it was an experiment for the producer, for us, and we're trying to bring back conservation onto prime time, which is something that broadcasters don't want to touch. It was like, we had a presenter, very, very knowledgeable young face, who went to these landscapes and with the scientists explored the region and, went in search of these animals. Season 2, that format did very well. So season 2, we said, let's get the anchor out and make the scientists the anchors. Yeah. Why not?
Yes.
If this format is done well, we can make the scientists.
Did that work though?
It worked.
It worked, okay.
It worked,
Yeah.
We had a voiceover to support it and all of that because everyone's not a great speaker. And that's what we did. And that was again a very typical documentary. And now I'm doing the 3rd season. And I'm like, we've seen just in the last 2 years, no one's watching documentary films. आप wildlife तो बहुत दूर रखो. Documentary, non-fiction ज़्यादा कोई देख नहीं रहा है. No one's commissioning it. And if you see, even OTT platforms are putting in their money with very, very big production houses that do natural history films. The Silverbacks and BBC Studios, all of those. People like us don't stand a chance. Though now I hope we do because Elephant Whisperers has won.
Yeah,
so
what
the
happened
focus
in the Oscars? I feel like there are so many. I don't know how everyone feels about when they watch this year's Oscars or not. And I want to lead this to my question to you as a woman in the field as well, because you did a film, Pied Piper, that influenced many and is such a popular subject. But when you go as a woman trying to pitch this story on that table, what we talked about earlier, and then the journey till seeing it till the end must have been difficult. But this year at the Oscars, I felt like there were, Indian recognition, and it was for real stories or historicity of the country. And it was all films that were, it's not hardcore Bollywood, let's just say it that way, right? And you're not hardcore Bollywood at all.
I worked in Bollywood.
But the
Can't deal
films
with
that
it.
you have made and you've been associated with as a woman, and this is something we ask in our podcast, so how was that journey for you, despite not having formal training, as you just have told us? How was that journey for you, and working on films like The Pied Piper?
Like kind of like is your I mean, just sort of to add to the question, because these are not easy situations to shoot in, right? Like you're shooting in the middle of a jungle, you're shooting in remote village somewhere. Has your gender identity ever been sort of a restricting factor in your opinion, or is it something that you've sort of, there's no difference between a man or a woman in the documentary filmmaking world. It's kind of like the question we're asking.
Or rather, like more broadly speaking, gender doesn't play a role. I refuse to believe that.
It plays a huge role.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I started off, I was all of 21. All right. I happened to meet Praveen, my husband, and he is from film school. Back then, he was doing a student film, which was going on broadcast, and he was doing it on the human leopard conflict in India, and I started assisting him. And he was in the US, I was here. He would keep coming, shooting, and going back. And because now I had got into this, I didn't want to do anything else. I wanted to explore wildlife filmmaking a lot more. So I worked with a production house, which for a very long time, for 8 years, but it turned into a huge disaster by the time I left. But it was a great experience while I was there, but I also did a lot of freelance work, all right? And I worked across genres. If someone said ad film, I'd go there. If someone said feature film, I'd go there. Someone said serving coffee on this brilliant production, I'd go there and serve coffee, because I was hungry to learn. I've always been dead against, I don't know, formal training, education, right? So obviously I don't want to go to film school, and wildlife film school, back then also there were courses. My husband was doing it, but I was very clear, no, I'm not leaving the country. I'm going to stay over here, very patriotic, and this is where I want to be. Not really realizing how the market works, the money is not here, the money comes from abroad. Even today, the money for natural history films comes from outside India, all right? And if, when I look back and I say, those first 10 years, that decade when I started, from 21 to 30, there was nobody I could talk to. There was nobody I could go to. There wasn't really YouTube and tutorials online. I just had to force myself to do what I was doing. Nobody took me, even organizations, the production house that I worked in. I remember when I first went in there, for 3 months, I would just sit in one corner and someone would give me some research work, and I had to do that, that broadband, the dialogue
remember the
thing.
sound. It comes to my dreams sometimes.
Yeah.
That and the Doordarshan.
Yeah.
We are that generation.
Yeah.
But, 3 months I just sat, nobody asked me for my opinion, and someone did ask me something once and I said, I don't like it, and they just looked at me up and down. Isko to kuch pata hi nahi hai ki kahan se aayegi. But so I remember going on my first shoot, and just as an assistant I was sent, not told anything. I just went and I picked up the tripod and I was told, nahi, tum mat uthao. I was like, no, I've seen people picking it up. I know. You won't be, it's very heavy.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I could pick it up. Camera I wouldn't touch because I was scared of it, but the stand that I saw people lugging from here and there, I was like, I can pick that up, but no, bahut heavy hai. So there were these biases that existed. And I was also navigating, and I think you've got to be smart enough to realize where you can push yourself and where you need to just shut up. Given I was no formal training, no authority, nothing, so I would just shut up, sit, just observe. And I pushed myself when it came to that, just sit, observe. There's an edit going on. I would just hang around. I'd ask the editor, if you don't mind, can I sit? Just watching what he's doing with the keypad and looking at what are the changes happening on screen. He does this, oh, that's happening. Oh, then this must be to do that. Cut that thing over here. That's how I really learned everything. But if I went and said, can you like spend an hour with me? No one had that time. No one gave me that kind of attention early on. So I just did everything and anything because I was really, really hungry to learn. And then the turning point came when I quit working with this production house. My husband and I got married. I was pregnant with my first child, and he'd always been a freelancer, my husband. And I had just quit, and we just realized that we don't have any money, all right? And we don't know what to do with ourselves. And then we heard of this thing called the Asian pitch. It's a pitch that used to happen every year, and only for documentaries. And we read a small little article in a newspaper on Arunachalam Muruganandam, the pad piper, the pad man. And we called him up, spoke to him, went down, spent 3 days, did a little shoot, put a trailer together, made a pitch document, traveled to Singapore because that's where this pitching workshop was, ceremony event was, and pitched it, and I won. You know, it was $70,000 US dollars, which was hardly anything that time.
But still, I mean,
But for me, for
Yeah.
someone, for you know, a husband, wife sitting at home for a year, baby coming, all right, we at that time didn't know how we're going to pay the hospital bill. It was like, we'll pay, swipe the credit card, and then just change our identity.
Run away into the wild.
Hospital will be paid for, credit card will be like, no, we've not had a child. No, this is not us. We don't know. We'll dispute it. But literally, that was the situation. I had a very difficult first pregnancy, and we didn't have money to buy clothes as I was expanding, and my husband's cousin was a big guy. I would tell him, give me your old t-shirts, no? I was 8 months pregnant, and we went to one of the big festivals and markets that happens in the US called the Jacksonville Film Festival. Fudged my papers because when you're 8 months and you
can't travel.
literally bled through your pregnancies, no one's going to give you, sanction you to travel, right? Fudged my papers and I traveled. I was like, "Bachcha ho jayega fir se," you know, but kaam paisa bhi chahiye. That was literally the condition we were in. Oh my God. But Piper happened at that time. And we made the film, and just after that, there was someone I know who came forward and said that, you know, we want to build a wildlife division, and why don't you and your husband, you know, head that division. It was a Bombay-based production house. So we did that work, and it was like whether you have work or don't have work. But then we were working, and we did two of the biggest films during that tenure, which were films done for the first time in India at night.
what films were they?
There's these two films called, a two-part series called Manas Return of the Giants and India's Wandering Lions on the Gir Lions.
Okay.
And we had a co-production with a UK-based company, Martin Dawn. I don't know if you've heard My Garden of 1,000 Bees. He just won. It's a film on bees.
Yeah, well,
I haven't heard of it, but
I think I've read about it somewhere, but
Okay.
I've not watched it.
Oh, it's a brilliant film. You must watch it. Martin, he's a geeky guy. He just loves to make his own cameras because he wants to shoot a particular creature and it requires a specialized camera, so he'll just build it.
he can build his own cameras.
Yeah,
That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. He's got a great history to him. So we tied up with him because we were very clear to be, getting permissions in India is going to be tough.
Yeah.
They don't allow you to film at night. It's sunrise to sunset, right? So we now need to film. Then use of artificial lights is not allowed. So that's why Martin came in, because he had made his own thermal cameras, his own starlight cameras, which are essentially cameras that work in the natural light at night. So whether it's, you know, moonlight or full moonlight or even no light, and obviously infrared. So this was the technology we used, and we made a film. And I think it was quite groundbreaking because it was the first time we saw what happens inside and outside protected areas, in areas where you know, man and animal are living, sharing the landscape. And they were lovely films that we did. So those were the two films that came out when we were working for that production house. But then I won the first national award.
How did that feel?
Yeah.
I just want to
Yeah.
ask,
How did that
after
feel?
all of that, after going 8 months pregnant to America for work,
Fudge papers and
fudge
everything.
papers, done everything, decided to not recognize your child when they came with the bill, you know, then winning
was
the
the plan.
national
It didn't
award.
happen.
Wow.
But you know, I remember I was in Bristol in UK, editing something, and this email came saying that you've won the national award, and this day is the ceremony. You got to be there. There's the protocol, do's and
What
don'ts.
did you win for again? Which
It was for the Pad Piper.
Pat Piper, yeah.
It was not supposed to be a science and technology film, but that's the category it won in. So be it. I'm very happy. And I was I was all alone in the evening, sitting in the room, just come back from work, and I started shaking, trembling, and there was nobody. And I called up my parents, I called up my husband, I called up my best friend, I called up anyone and everyone I knew, and no one answered the phone. And then I sent out this mass email to everyone, including my parents and my husband, my sister, everyone, saying, this is what's happened. I'm coming home,
Yeah.
you know. But it changed the way moving forward. That was the second decade of my career, the start of literally the second decade of my career. And I said to myself that I won this award. It's a huge recognition for me. I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. This is for me is the Oscars. All right. Um, I was all of what, 32 back then, and I said that if now I don't start a production company, I don't start my own brand, for the rest of my life I'm going to be dependent on some producer or the other pumping in money, not pumping in money, all right, begging. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Working with another production house, building their brand. If I don't do it now, I will never be able to do it. And so I quit. I put in my papers. I quit the production house. I was working. My husband continued for a while because both of us couldn't again take the risk. And
you have a baby coming.
Baby
second one.
Yeah, second one. Yeah. Same story.
But you worried about this baby?
Again, we were in a crisis, financial crisis, even in the second one. But then I had a plan and it
But
worked.
in a better situation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was a
more
choice.
Experienced,
Yeah.
understanding the market much better. You knew who to approach. The first decade was all about learning and figuring things out. Now you know how it works, or at least you figured the basics of it. You knew what you could do, where you could go, how to pitch, whom to pitch to. That's very important. Okay, so we knew all of that, and I started my production company, and I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, and nothing happened. There was no work. All right, we did all kinds of small odd jobs here
Yeah,
and
it wasn't
there.
this magical story that, you won the national award, you start your film company and everything is...
That's what you think.
Yeah,
That's
it
what you
wasn't
think
that.
it is. Just because you won one national award,
Yeah.
everyone's going to come knocking on your door. No, it doesn't work like that. I think national award also, so many films get made, but I think half the people do not know how to enter their films in national awards. So I think a lot of films better than mine would have never made it because either they don't know how to enter, they don't know what the process is, or they just maybe don't even want to. But that apart, the Gaia people, my company, I had formed it and doing all kinds of small little things. Then I applied for the Asian pitch again because they had changed the rules that if you won once, you cannot apply for another 3 years. So I pitched again and I got my second human interest film. And in between that, what happened is the two wildlife films that the one wildlife film that we had done with that production house in Tigers, that won a national award. Okay, for best editing in non-fiction. So that was a second national award. And I did a third film called, for Pad Piper, I had won 2 national awards, producer and director. So we did, I did my second human interest film called Mrityu Bhoj, the Death Feast. It's essentially the tradition we have on the 13th day after someone dies, feeding the community, or 13 Brahmins, or invariably feeding the community, right? The Tervi, as we call it. So it was on that. And that went on to win another national award. And that, I think by then also, it was literally like the end of my second decade. And also having done so much of wildlife, which was non-stop, we were doing it, right? We'd reached a point where we were like, we need to do something different. Wildlife, the stories, these big cat and megafauna, like you said, focus on just rhinos and snakes and elephants and leopards and tigers. We've done it. There's nothing more to say. There's really nothing more do we do. And thus was born the idea of doing something on the lesser known species, animals that live in the shadow of the tiger. All right? There was born the idea of On the Brink. And for the last 5 years, that's what I'm doing. I can still work in the international market, do the big budget, pitch, and I know I will get it, the big budget films that really get you the money and attention. But I'm very happy doing what I am doing. I want to make this the longest running series on lesser known species that's come out of India. I mean, I work with creatures where there is no even, their stock footage doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's
Your stock footage doesn't exist. So I'm creating a visual bank of sorts, and I'm very happy doing it. I'm getting to travel and experience India, which I haven't done in the first 20 years. I haven't. Because I was so focused on making money in a way.
As you keep talking, it's such incredible work that documentary filmmakers such as you have done. But one of the things that I always, and I absolutely love watching documentary, non-fiction. But a problem that I think a lot of us face is access to these films. Either we wait till it comes on television,
which will never
they
come
don't
in
get
India.
a theatrical release. At least in India, I don't know. Is there a theatre that releases documentaries? Even if some good person opened a theatre only for documentaries, you know, I don't think it would survive a 3-year cycle, right? Is this access? We're glad that a lot of these online platforms have the documentary category over there, but then again, the selection over there, country to country, is
varies.
so it's that access. And you know, you work so hard, like listening to your story, I can't help myself but ask this question. You work so hard and you build such a great archive of real facts, but it's so difficult to reach for the common audience.
Yes.
You know, so how do you feel about that? And is there a hack?
I think every question is
The
so far
hack
been,
is
there a hack?
always money. Get a good producer.
No, for me. The
Oh,
hack
to
for
watch.
me, to watch. You
No,
know, like
I'll tell you,
how
but-
do I get to watch this incredible piece of cinema?
You know, one of the things that has happened to me is that I've now on the jury of a lot of film festivals, including the International Emmy in the documentary category.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And being a jury member, you get to see so many films, and you know that you will never in the next 20
No need
years.
to show off.
I know. How we get to
I'm
watch
asking
them?
you what is the website, and you're telling me join the film festival jury.
And we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap this up a little bit. I wanted to also actually, there's a question that's maybe not specific to being a filmmaker, but maybe in your knowledge as a expert, wildlife expert, because you know you're somebody who has worked closely with the subject. You've sort of visited different national parks in India. How have our conservation efforts been, and can we possibly end this on some element of like optimism as opposed to doom and gloom, in terms of like having some hope for the fact that like conservation efforts in India are getting better, you know, the bureaucracy in parks is maybe becoming better to deal with. Clearly we might not get an optimistic answer, but I want to just have a little bit of an idea in terms of like, where is it headed, you know? I mean, are we at least somewhat in the right track?
Okay, I'll answer your question first. Where do you watch these films? OTT platforms, yes. Now, if you're really interested, go beyond an Amazon and Netflix and look at other platforms that exist, Mubi, All Saints. There are a lot of films also, great films that also get released on YouTube. I shouldn't encourage it, but there are also pirated copies on YouTube that you can watch if you know the film that you want to see. But they're there, so you might as well watch them. So this is really where it is. All That Breathes, with the one we were talking about, it's on HBO. I don't think so you get that subscription in India, but it will come. India is being recognized as a very important market when it comes to content. So these platforms will come to this country. But there is a great bank already that exists on platforms outside Netflix and Amazon that you can explore and are available in this country. So that could potentially be a starting point. And if you know filmmakers, ask them, you know, can we do a community screening where you get to watch a film and a whole lot of like-minded people get to watch a film, or you know, and there are a lot of takers for documentary. Just because our networks don't show it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are people, there is an audience. Answering your question, gloom and doom, it is a situation of gloom and doom, you know, but I see a lot of hope, and I see a hope in the number of people that are coming into not just wildlife filmmaking, but into the nature and environment space in different capacities. You know, not just the scientists and researchers, journalists, lawyers, artists, musicians. There's a very famous young girl who does music around the natural world. Painters, photographers. There's just so much that you can do and be connected to the natural world. If it's a passion or just an interest, but there are ways of being connected and also being able to, if not full-time, part-time, to be able to monetize that passion a bit. And I think this is that army that's rising, you know, and in different spheres, that's really going to make change happen. It takes time. The natural world is not something that will heal or recover overnight. We just have to be mindful that there's certain steps we humans have to take to ensure that there is some sort of basic protection. And there is also the need to realize that we don't have to intervene everywhere. It's nature, she has a healing and recovery mechanism. Trust that also.
Absolutely. I can never forget mid-lockdown when once I had to go for an emergency drive to get something. The sky was so fantastic, I lost my way.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's like nature has a way of coming back. So I totally agree with you. It has a way of coming back, and we just have to stop intervening.
And I think, it was my husband and discussing, it's great to have an annual lockdown.
Yeah, no, it's been a conservation effort, right?
Coincided with school vacations. Nay, Delhi is going to go into a lockdown. Now, either you sit at home or you just go out of the city. Do it in the pollution time. I mean, just before pollution, so there's that build-up kind of reduces. But I think make it. Why not experiment with it in the 21st century, for God's sake?
It is true, though. Like there is logic to that, to the extent that I read. Remember when we wanted to go to Bora Bora? No, not Bora Bora. We wanted to go to Boracay in the Philippines, and we were all very excited about this trip. And then eventually, I read an article that Boracay had been so flooded by tourists that they had to stop tourists from coming just to let the island regenerate.
Yes.
And that is obviously a very obvious, conservation tactic that people do use for coasts and things like that, islands. That if you just stop people from coming and messing with the natural habitat, give it 2-3 years, the environment can regenerate, recover. And maybe more of that should be implemented. You're right. Maybe
it is, one good thing in India, the 4 months of monsoons, our national parks are shut.
Yeah.
Which is very good. The water obviously rejuvenates and all of that, but it's very good. Animals get 4 months of respite from seeing humans and being surrounded by vehicles all the time. It's a great practice. Yeah. And I think there's something we need to do, and I think one of the basic things, just as an audience or a layman, is be mindful of your footprints in everything that you do. And it, again, is not something that happens overnight. You have to be very conscious of the decisions and actions, your decisions of what you want to do and how you want to live. Just start becoming mindful. It's not about just teaching your child because the textbook has a whole chapter on, on sustainability and coexistence. No, start making it a part of your lifestyle. Look after your micro habitat.
Yeah, your home.
You are. Someone says, and I see a lot of it on social media because obviously I'm a targeted audience for all that kind of content. 100 people doing sustainability correctly versus 1 million doing sustainability incorrectly, but building on it as they go, will have a bigger change. Start with your micro habitat. Each take care of your micro habitat. And it'll build on that. It really will. The larger habitats, the connection that we have within the ecosystems will all come together.
And also, I think do the things that you can do, because for someone like me, I quite get intimidated when I'm given this checklist of the things I should be doing, because quite a few of them are like not that convenient or that possible.
Yes.
And then I have to remind myself, just because you can't do them all doesn't mean you can't start with the 3 that are easy. So just start with the few that are
your
easy
convenience,
and build on.
your reality, your circumstances. Pick and choose, but do something. Each small little act makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. And I think that's the message that we want to end this on as well, that each small act makes a difference. And it's not all doom and gloom, even though the weather might suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
But thank you, Akanksha, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was a very insightful conversation. And actually, for once, I'm not left feeling depressed. We've had a couple of these, on environment and sustainability.
When Delhi became a gas chamber, we had one of those where the air was just so bad.
Yeah. And they started off upbeat and we're all really happy and talking. And as the conversation goes on, you can hear all our voices
I think
get
both of us wanted to end the podcast.
We're just like,
oh yeah.
That's it, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
This is just sad. Let's go sulk in a corner. Yeah. But fortunately, that's not the feeling today. Thank you.
You're welcome.